Hey everyone, and welcome to the 5th episode in the procedurally generated mining game that has tile scrolling. What a wonderful title. Today we'll finally add in the selector, and we'll be adding the mining in so you can actually mine blocks and destroy everything around you. Before we get into the episode, make sure you drop a like and consider subscribing, and also leave a comment down below. But anyway, let's just get right into this tutorial. Alrighty, so I have two new sprites. One is called Selector, and one is called Held Item. The Selector is going to be the little box that falls around your mouse, and within it I just have 1, which is a breaking, 2, which is just a little less broken, 3 is a little less broken, 4 is less broken, 5 is just literally 2 pixels. And it also has a white selector on the outside. It's just hard to see, but the box is around all of the costumes. And then I have a costume called Selector, which is just the white box. Within Held Item, I just have all of the different pickaxes and their item IDs. So the wooden pickaxe is 11, and then next to that I have the item ID, which is 11, but then with the capital letter L on the end. And all it is it just flipped. So basically how the pickaxes are is they are on the very top of the center. Hold up, let me make this paintbrush less thick. Okay, so they're right here on the top here, and then for the player facing to the left, it's just flipped on the bottom of that. So then I have 12, which is a stone pickaxe, 12L, 13 the tin, 13L, 14 the copper with 14L, 15 for the silver pickaxe, then 15L, 10, which is a gold pickaxe. It's probably one of my favorite pickaxes in the game. I think it's really cool. Kind of looks like the Infinity Gauntlet. Then 16L, which is just it flipped, and then there's one more, which is like the Easter egg one, which I'm not going to show. So if you want to make your own pickaxe, what you're going to want to do is to draw your hilt and all that stuff, then draw the pickaxe. Oh wow, that's some art skill right there. Then once you're done, you want to go ahead and center it, and then move it to the very top of the center like so. Then you'll name your pickaxe and duplicate it. Then instead of the 2, go ahead and just do L like so. Click on this flip vertically, and it should just flip like so. But if it flips like this for some reason, all you need to do is center it and then move it down like that. And as always, these sprites and costumes will be in the link in the description, so you can go check them out to use them in your own project. Okay, now for the actual tutorial, we need to do the same thing we did in the last episode. So you know how we set up the tile meta? Well, there needs to also be an item meta. So we basically need to do the same thing here. So first, let's set up the needed lists. So make a list called item meta, which is the same as a tile meta, but for items. So if you want a deeper explanation of how all this stuff is going to work, then we'll go watch the last episode, because I explained how the metas work and how you get the information from them and all that stuff. Then click OK, and we'll also need a ID grabber underscore item meta, like so, and this will allow us to get the IDs for the item meta. Okay, so now that we have those, we need to go ahead and make a custom block that will create the item meta. Click on make a block and name this one create item meta. Now click on run screen without refresh, and then OK. Alrighty, now what you want to do is create the item meta right after the tile meta is created. And then inside of the create item meta, first delete all of the item meta, and then delete all of the ID grabber item meta. That way it'll clear it out each time we start. So to make this a little less confusing, let's go ahead and rename this other one to new tile entry, and now make a custom block called new item entry, then a colon, then item ID with a colon, and then an input called ID, a label item name with a colon, then an input item name. Last but not least, for this episode, all we'll need is mine speed with a colon, and then an input speed, and that will keep track of how fast you can break blocks. And click OK. Let's also rename these two old ones. So this guy right here will be add tile data with a colon, and then an ID with a colon, and click OK. And this one will stay the same. Add tile grabber ID seems pretty good. So now we can make the item versions of it. So go ahead and make a custom block called add item data with a colon, and then ID, and then a label ID. And this will just add the item to the item meta. So within it, we can go ahead and literally do the exact same thing. So just duplicate the one for the tile and change this to the item meta. Then make a custom block for the grabber ID. So add item grabber ID with a colon, then an input ID. And then for that, duplicate the one over here, and then change this to the ID grabber of item meta, and make sure you change this add tile data to the add item data, and then blank. Okay, so to test this is all working, if I open up the item meta and then the item grabber meta, if I click the add item data ID and just click on whatever 1, as you can see it's 1 there, or if I do that it's that. Okay, so that's working. And if then I do add item grabber ID and add whatever, as you can see, it adds blank to this list and then the value in that list. Okay, so that is working. So now we can do the same thing we did above. So go ahead and set the meta number to -1, so that way it takes out 1 for the ID grabber, then add the item ID grabber, the ID, then add the item data, the item name, and add the item data, the speed. Okay, so if we've done everything correctly, inside the create item meta, we should be able to do new item entry and fill in the data, and it should work. So for the item ID, I'll do 1, the item name will be stone, and the mine speed will be null because you can't mine with a stone tile. And if we go ahead and start this game, that is working correctly. As you can see, there's 1, which is blank, and then 2, which is stone, and 3, which is null because it doesn't have a mine speed, and the ID grabber doesn't quite look correct. That's because I forgot to do this part right here. So duplicate that script, and that'll make sure that it fills in this data with blank and changes to the ID grabber item meta. Now you can see that that's blank in between, and that is correct. So now we can get any information from the item meta using this ID. Also, sorry about this big message up top. For some reason, it won't go away no matter how many times I save it. Okay, so now let's really quick add in all the data for all the different items in this game. Number 2 will be dirt. It doesn't have mine speed, obviously. These are for the tile items, which we don't actually have in the game yet. So these won't actually be used until we add the inventory in, which is not in this episode. Number 3 is long grass. 4 is the wood. 5 is the clay. 6 is the torch. 7 is the ladder. 8 is tin ore. 9 is coal ore. 10 is copper ore. And 11 is the wood pick. Okay, so we can finally get into the mine speeds now because a wooden pickaxe has a mine speed of 0.03. Number 12 is the stone pick, which has a mine speed of 0.07. Number 13 is the tin pick, has a mine speed of 0.1. 14 is the copper pick, and it has a mine speed of 0.15. 15 is the silver pick, and it has a mine speed of 0.2. 16 is a golden pick that has a mine speed of 0.4. And then 17 is the Easter egg item, which I'm going to spoil a little bit, so if you don't want to hear it, then just skip ahead a bit, is the spoon that has a mine speed of 0.8. And then the last 2 tile things are 18, which is silver ore, and it has null mine speed because you can't mine with silver ore. And lastly, 19 is gold ore that also doesn't have mine speed. So if we start this game in the item meta, now we have a bunch of information, and if we check the ID grabber for the item meta, it matches those and has blank in between. Alrighty, that is looking good. Okay, so I got a lot of comments about this, and I think that I didn't explain the ID system good enough so far. So I like to clear it up a little bit. So these IDs need to match your IDs that your costumes are. So let me show you what I mean. In the tile manager, I'll just pick a random one, 12 for instance, which is the torch. And if I go into the backdrop, number 12 is also the torch here, and this is the information. So that ID number needs to match everywhere. Same with the items. As you can see here, the ID 13 is the tin pick, and if I go into the held item, the tin pickaxe is named 13. So as you can see, all the IDs match up, and that's how the system works, so you need to make sure you do that. But hopefully now you have a better understanding of how the ID system works in this game. Okay, so I'm going to download my game so I don't lose my progress, and hopefully the message should go away if I reload. What? It just logged me out. Okay, I got back in and everything seems to be working now. So now that we have the backend, we can go ahead and actually start using that. So let's go ahead and go into the selector and make the selector work so we can move it around. So in the selector, add a when I receive hide loading screen. Go ahead and show and set the size to the backdrop of stage and change this to the tile scale of tile manager times 100 and then put that in there. Switch costume to selector and set the ghost effect, which will make it transparent, to 65%. Okay, so hopefully if we start this game, you should see a little selector thingy popping up. Yep, it's down here and it's slightly transparent, and if I make it go to 0, 0, you can see it right in the middle of the screen. Now we need to get the position of the tile that our mouse is hovering over. So go into the tile manager and create a for sprite variable called selector X and another one called selector Y. Now underneath the tile VFX and the tick position tiles, check if touching mouse pointer, set selector X to tile X and set the selector Y to the tile Y. So now you can see if we start this game, when we hover over tiles, the X and Y will be set. Yep, there we go. They are set to all sorts of different numbers, and that's the coordinate of the tile we're hovering over. Awesome. So you can go ahead and hide those now, and we can use that in the selector. Inside the selector, add a when I receive tick position tiles. We want to change X by a minus block and put the desired position, which is selector X subtracted from its current position, X position, then divide all that by 1.2 so it smooths it out a bit. Duplicate this and let's do the same for the Y. So change the Y by selector Y minus the Y position divided by 1.2. Go to front as well here. Now this alone won't actually work because we don't account for the position of the camera. So from the selector X, we need to subtract off scroll X and then do the same for the Y part. So take that out and add a minus operator in here, put that over back in the left, and then subtract scroll Y from the target position. And if we start this game, look at this, we have a selector moving to the tile we're hovering over, and it accounts for the camera movement as well. So in the tick position tiles, let's add a custom block called break tiles and then click OK and run that underneath the movement code. Now we need to get the current tile data of what we're hovering over. So in the player, pull this get current tile into the selector. Now let's go ahead and rename some of these variables. So for the player tile X and Y, just rename this to selected tile X and then selected tile Y. For the player tile index, you can just rename that to selected tile index. And then for the player tile ID, name this item number of tile ID. And now edit the get current tile and delete all these inputs and just change it to get current tile like so and click OK. Now remove the X and Y, and now we need to figure out the position of the mouse. Now of course we can't just do the mouse position because this game is scrolling, so we want to take mouse X plus the scroll X to account for the scrolling, then duplicate this for the Y part and do mouse Y plus the scroll Y. So really quick, let's make sure this is working by just saying the tile name we're hovering over. So to do this, just do item 1 of item meta and change this to the item number of tile ID. Then to get the name of that, we just need to add 1 to the variable, and it's not working. Oh wait, that's because I never actually ran the get current tile. So make sure you run get current tile right here, and as you can see, it's not working. That's because I made another mistake. I'm saying it from the item meta. We want to do the tile meta, not item meta. And now you can see that whatever we hover over, it says the tile name. So we have tin ore, clay, flower, long grass, grass, dirt, wood, leaf logs, leaves, air. Okay, so this is all working. So now our tile selector is getting the current tile we're hovering over. To make a for the sprite only variable called old selected tile, and then check if not the selected tile index is equal to the old selected tile. So that just means we move the selector to a different tile. So if we did that, then we want to make a custom block called default selector and run without screen refresh, and then click OK. Run the default selector if we moved our selector. In the default selector, for now we can just switch costume to selector. Now let's do the mining script. Add an if else, checking if the mouse is down, and if we're not mining, then get the current tile and then just do default selector. Now we need to keep track of how long we've been mining, so make a for the sprite only variable called mine duration. Now in the default selector, go ahead and set the mine duration to 0, and now inside of the mining script we can check if the mine duration is 0, which means we just started mining. Then we'll set old selected tile to the selected tile index, so it updates that, then sets the mine duration to the mine duration of the current tile, which we don't actually have yet. So we need to go into the backdrops and edit the tile meta to contain data for how long it takes to mine. So add a label to the new tile entry called mine time with a colon, then an input mine time, and click OK. Now inside the new tile entry, add the tile data mine time. Okay, now we need to fill in all these things. Air and bedrock are null because you can't mine them. Stone is 2 seconds. Dirt is 0.5 seconds, so half a second. Grass is 1 second. Long grass is 0.2 seconds. Flower is also 0.2. Wood is 1.5 seconds. Leaves are 0.5. Leaf logs are also 1.5 seconds. Clay is 1.7 seconds. Torch is 0.3 seconds. Bedrock dirt is null because you can't mine them. Ladder is 1 second. Tin ore is 2.5 seconds. Coal ore is 3 seconds. Copper ore is 4 seconds. Silver ore is 8 seconds. Last but not least, gold is 10 seconds. So as you can see now, if we open up the tile meta, you should see that there's another slot now that for bedrock and air say null, but for stone it's 2, grass is 1, and it has all the mine duration. To get the mine duration of the current tile we're hovering over, we need to do the item number of tile ID, then the item number of tile ID plus 3, put that in the item of tile meta. So to make sure that's working inside of here, which is just the loop, we can say that. So it should say the amount of time it takes to mine the tiles we're hovering over. Here it says null because we're air. This is 1, this is 0.2, this is 2.5, this is 0.5, this is 1. Okay, so that's working correctly. So now that we know that's working, we can actually use that. So now we need to keep track of the speed of the current tool. So make a variable called current mine speed for all sprites and click OK. And now for now in the beginning, set the current mine speed to 0.01. Change in this else here, which means we're mining, the mine duration by 0 minus current mine speed. Then we need to switch costume to the correct breaking according to the mine duration variable. Mine duration divided by, duplicate this, so we're taking the current progress divided by the total time it takes to mine a tile, take that times 10, then divide all that by 2, and then we need to make sure it's always rounded, so take the ceiling of that. Switch costume to all that. Okay, so hopefully if we've done everything correctly, when we click on a tile, the mine duration should be set and our costume will switch. When we click on this, yes, look at this, the mine duration starts at whatever the block takes to mine. For the grass, it starts at 1, then it ticks down according to our current mine speed, which right now is 0.01, and then if we move tiles, it gets reset. So this is working. As you can see, these ones break really fast and everything looks good. Okay, now let's make it actually break. Check right here if the mine duration is less than 0.01, which means we're done breaking, then run default selector, then make a custom block called break tile with a colon, and then meta ID with a colon, and then an input ID. Now go ahead and run break tile right here and just put the item number of tile ID right there. For now, this is just simple, so we're just going to replace selected tile index of tile grid with 1, which is air. Hopefully, we can actually break tiles. Mine, 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 and then look at this, it's replaced with air, and it's like it never was there. Okay, this is really cool. And you can see if we increase the mine speed to like 0.1, say, we can mine a lot faster. Yep, look at this, everything mines way faster. Okay, so we'll go ahead and remove this current mine speed because we are going to set up the held item. In the held item, go ahead and add a when I receive hide loading screen, hide, and set the size to 250%. Then we need a variable to keep track of the ID of the held item. So make a variable called current item number and set that to 11 because that's the ID of the wooden pickaxe. Then just go ahead and forever go to front. Now in a when I receive position player tick, we need to make a custom block that will move the held item. So make a custom block called move held item with a colon, X input, then a label Y with a colon, an input Y, a label called direction with a colon, and then an input dir, and click run without screen refresh, and then click OK. So now we have this nice custom block that we can move our player. For now, let's go ahead and go to X, Y. Now in the move position, go ahead and do backdrop number of player and change this to the X of player. We need to subtract off the scroll X and put that in the X. Duplicate this and change this to the Y of player minus scroll Y. Make sure it's the variable Y, not the actual position. Then for the direction, go ahead and do direction of player divided by 90, so that way it's either -1 or 1. Now we need to keep track of if we're hitting or not. So we need to go into the player and add a when I receive hide loading screen forever if the mouse is down and Y speed is less than 0.1, which means we're not in the air. Then we make a new variable called underscore hitting for the sprite only and set that hitting to 1, set the player costume to 0, repeat 6 times, which is the total amount of frames in the hitting animation, change the player costume by 1, and then wait 0.01 seconds. Then in the else here, set hitting to 0 because we're not hitting. Whenever we hold the mouse down to break a block, the player goes into turbo mode and hitting is set to 1, and then it's 0 when it's done. Now let's actually make the animation work for the player. So at the very top here, above the change player costume, check if the hitting is greater to 0. You could also do equal to 1, but it doesn't really matter. Then you can duplicate all of this and input the starting costume of the hit animation, which I believe is 12. So put 12 here, then mod the total amounts in the animation, which is 6. Then we will stop this script so that way it doesn't do any other animation, and hopefully now whenever we hit, our player swings its hand. Yep, look at this. Whenever we are hitting, it actually looks like our player is swinging their arms, and then when we let go, it finishes the animation, and that is awesome. Now let's make the player automatically look at the mouse pointer whenever we're hitting. So check if hitting is greater than 0 to make sure we're actually hitting in an if statement, and then an if else in there, and check if the mouse X is greater than the X position, which is the player's screen position, then point in direction 90, otherwise point in direction -90, so that way it looks to the left. Now look at this. Whenever we're hitting, the player will look at the mouse, and that looks pretty cool. So let's make the player actually use a pickaxe. So inside of the player, we can go ahead and set the current mine speed to the item 1 of item meta, and then put the item number in the ID grabber for the item meta, and then do the current item number inside of there. And to get the mine speed, we want to add 2 to this index right here. And the ID 11 is the wood pickaxe, which as you can see has a mine speed of 0.03. So hopefully if we start this game and show the current mine speed, yep, it's 0.03. Okay, so that means that now it's updating depending on what pickaxe we're holding. Now to make this work with the animation, check if else, and then a greater than, duplicate this guy and put hitting in here. So if the hitting is greater than 0, which means we are hitting, then we'll show the sprite, otherwise we'll hide the sprite. Then inside of this move block, go ahead and get rid of this for now, and check if direction is greater than 0, which means we're facing to the right, then switch costume to current item number, which for us is 11, so it'll switch costume to this. But if we're facing to the left, then we'll switch costume to the current item number, then join the current item number with capital L. As you can see, if we duplicate this and click on it, it says 11L, which is the flipped version. Then we need to go to the X and Y. I shouldn't have got rid of that. Okay, so hopefully if we test this out, when we click, we see a pickaxe right on the player. Yep, look at this, and it even updates to the correct direction. So now comes the tedious part. We need to move the position and direction of the pickaxe for each of the frames of our hitting animation so it lines up perfectly. Now it will take some time, but it'll be worth it in the long run because all the animation will be automatic. So we can infinitely add new items without having to make the animation frame. So let's go ahead and do that. So first check if, duplicate this and do the player costume of player is equal to 1, go to the X, then put that in a minus and take the direction times 15. Then add 15 to the Y. Then we need to point direction, the direction times 90. So you can now see that it will go to its hand depending on the direction. So you can see when we first started hitting, if you imagine the first frame, it's actually perfectly aligned depending on our direction. How this is working is the direction is 1 if we're to the right and -1 if we're to the left. So we subtract off the direction times 15. So if it's to the right, then it subtracts off 15, which will move it a little bit to the left. And if we're facing to the left, it adds 15, which will move it to the right. The next frame, which is 2. So we'll do this times 12 here, and then point direction times 100. The frame 3 is 10 times the direction plus 13 times 115. Frame 4 is the direction times 4, then the Y plus 7, and the direction times 130. And then otherwise, we go ahead and just do that times 15 again, and then we'll subtract 10 from the Y, so it goes down, and then take this times 180 for the direction. So if we've done everything correctly, you should see that the pickaxe will follow our hand animation. Yes, look at this. Whatever direction we're facing, the pickaxe actually looks like it's mining. Okay, I actually messed something up here. On the very bottom one, we actually want to add the direction, not subtract, so that's why it looks a little off. Oh yeah, look at that. Now when we hit, it perfectly aligns. So if we go ahead and set the held item number to 14, which is copper, you should see that we can mine faster, and we have a copper pickaxe. Yep, we have a copper pickaxe, and look at this, we can mine faster. So there we go. You can finally see the results of setting up all the tile metas and all that stuff to get us mining. So now we can actually go down into the world and explore, and it's super easy to add new items. If I make a new pickaxe, use my beautiful art skills, I'm going to name this 25, because why not? Duplicate this and then name this 25L. Flip this vertically. You can see if I set the current item number to 25 and start this game, whenever we hit, look at this, our pickaxe is that weird looking purple pickaxe, and we can't mine with it because we didn't add the ID 25 to the tile meta. Now if we want to do that, we could duplicate this and then do the item ID to 25, name this whatever test, and then the mining speed will be 1. So So now you can see that it should register it as an actual item because we added it to the item ID. Look at this, we can insta-mine stuff because it's set to the speed of 1, except for some of the harder stuff like coal. It takes a little bit of a delay. Thank you all so much for watching. Before I'm out, I'm going to delete this horrible pickaxe. Okay, but anyway, this has been Owen, and I am out.